These days, cinemas are about more than just movies. They're about experiences. It's winning that Friday night bowling tournament. It's finally beating your brother in laser tag. It's date night with cocktails and a love seat upgrade. Whatever experiences you offer, you need a POS system that can keep up. With over 30 years of development, Tapos offers a massive feature set, including omni-channel food and ticket sales, embedded CRM, loyalty and membership, custom cloud-based reporting, and third-party integrations with FECs. Learn more at taposapp.com.
Another point that we really want to illustrate is at 6%, I'm not aware of what is on at the movies. We still have a job as an industry to improve the awareness of what is on at the movies. More marketing is really important.
This is the Box Office Podcast. I'm Daniel Aria, the editorial director of Box Office Pro, the Pulse of Theatrical Exhibition. Here once again in our daily CinemaCon edition, brought to you by Tapos. And in today's episode, we're going to be recapping the Lionsgate and Warner Brothers presentations at CinemaCon before we head over to our sponsored segment with our colleagues from ICE Theaters. And then to round off the discussion, I interview Jane Hastings, the head of the Global Cinema Federation and CEO of Event Cinemas, one of the top circuits in Australia. But let's start the way we usually do here, going over the schedule here on Wednesday, April 2nd in Las Vegas. Bright and early start with the Angel Studios slate presentation at 8 a.m., followed by a 9:30 a.m. screening of Universal Pictures and DreamWorks Animation's screening of How to Train Your Dragon. That is the live action adaptation of How to Train Your Dragon that is scheduled for later this year. The trade show opens at 11 a.m. and at 3:45 p.m. we're going to be having the Universal and Focus Features presentations before the 8:15 presentation from Amazon MGM to round off the evening. Joining us here in the discussion panel segment of today's episode, we've got our friend Scott Mandelson, a regular contributor to Puck News. He also runs the Outside Scoop, basically platform on Substack. Scott, welcome back. And of course, I can't forget to mention the Box Office Podcast. Same name as our podcast, but Box Office, space between box and office. If you're looking for it, that's how you can tell which one is Scott's podcast, which one's ours.
Don't worry, yours still comes up first.
Oh, it does. I was sure you'd be keeping tabs. But we're all friends here. I've been on yours. You've been on ours.
Yes,
we're colleagues. We're collaborators.
Why does this coffee taste like poison?
We'll get into the poison chalice part of the conversation when we talk about Warner Brothers. But there's other things to discuss here because the morning started with a State of the Industry address from Cinema United, Michael O'Leary going on stage and echoing the calls for a 45-day minimum theatrical exclusivity window that would also come up in the big think tank panel session later this afternoon, or yesterday afternoon as you listen to this, with the Cineworld CEO, Eduardo Acuna, also really hammering home the point that the 45-day window is a big priority for exhibition. Calls are just getting louder for this. I think that's the real big takeaway from the State of the Industry. Of course, we had a victory lap from Neon preceding this address. Before we get to our reactions of what we saw from Neon, do you guys think that the 45-day window that exhibition has been so loudly calling for here at CinemaCon 2025 is at all close to being a reality?
No, only because even if Universal/Comcast is the only holdout, there's still going to be a pretty big holdout.
Chad Kenrick from Box Office Pro also joining us here on the panel. Chad, that 45-day window has been a consistent rallying cry here at CinemaCon 2025. I think it's the tagline. It's CinemaCon. Yeah. And then under that is 45-day windows for bust.
Yeah.
What do you think is the climate right now around this topic?
I think it's definitely been the highlight so far this week. I think it will continue to be the highlight this week. And I don't know, I like seeing when films are in theaters. Maybe I didn't get to that opening weekend. I want to go see this movie, but I just haven't had a chance because I've been too busy. So, I think there's room there for those to extend. We'll see what happens.
Compounding this problem is something that Michael O'Leary said in his State of the Industry address, is slate awareness.
Mm-hmm.
He cited a study from the research group NRG that there is a decline in awareness in the general population of the movies that are coming out. And this is something that we have to find a way, and it's not just the studios that have to solve this problem. Exhibitors are right there with the studios in being tasked to find a solution. How do you increase awareness of the movies that are coming out? I think it's a huge problem that goes hand in hand with the Windows
existential
conversation.
crisis that has been slow, long, and inevitable. Simplistically speaking, when you have fewer people that see non-tentpole films in theaters, which has been the case since, I would say, 2016. That's when I first started noticing the bottom just collapsing on studio programmers. If people see fewer non-tentpole movies in theaters, they're going to see fewer trailers for non-tentpole movies in theaters. If they watch less linear television, they're going to see fewer TV spots for those films. And obviously, if they read little to no newspapers or magazines, they're not going to get print ads. And that's the existential challenge, because in the proverbial good old days, and you can argue that was 80s, 90s, even early 2010s, I would say, marketing wasn't necessarily about creating awareness, because to a certain extent, you had a large populace that wanted to go to the movies as a casual entertainment option. So they would say, hey, what's playing? Or they would watch commercial television and say, oh, I saw a preview for that last night on ER, or whatever the hell is on Thursdays, must-see TV these days. But, so creating awareness was not the issue, but you had a pool of viewers that wanted to go to the movies. They were going to go. And they had a general idea of what was out. But your job was to say, okay, how do we convince these people to see our movie instead of theirs? Mm-hmm. But now you just have to sweat blood and tears just to make people aware of a picture. Yeah. You need 10 viral TikTok Megan dances.
That's the problem, is the fragmentation of where people could consume their media. It's not just broadcast television with a little bit of pay cable. It's too many avenues, which I think fragments the spend. It makes it, yes, I guess in theory, easier to target certain folks, but also a lot harder to reach a mass audience. Let's go right into the studio presentations, because that was the other big headline of today. Lionsgate opening the day's show. Oh, why am I going to Lionsgate? Completely blanking. Neon had a victory lap.
They did.
With footage from the Academy Awards and some trailers. Chad, what stood out from you from that Neon presentation?
Yeah, they took a well-deserved victory lap for Nora, and they didn't show footage from these, but they did mention a few films. Splitsville with Dakota Johnson, I Love Boosters, Demi Moore, Osgood Perkins has another film called Keeper, and also The Wrong Girls, which is a Seth Rogen, Kristen Stewart film. But we did get to see some stuff from The Life of Chuck, the Stephen King story, which looks really good, and also a really creepy horror movie, Together, which is Dave Franco and Alison Brie, which also
body horror. I spoke to some exhibitors and saw it.
I did not watch the trailer because I'm going to see it anyway, so why spoil myself?
Well, I think that slate presentation, it wasn't really a slate presentation. It was a quick couple of trailers there to open the morning.
It was funny, and I'm skipping slightly ahead to Lionsgate, so forgive me. But we saw the Life of Chuck trailer, which looked great. And then we eventually saw a presentation for Lionsgate's The Long Walk. And my thought was, hey, that's cool. Mark Hamill's in 2 non-Star Wars films in a single year. I'm literally about to add a period to that sentence when we got the email saying that he was getting the Star Icon Award at the Thursday Night Awards show. So good. I'm not the only one that noticed.
I ran into him in the hallways, by the way.
I'm sure
I love
very
CinemaCon
funny.
because you're walking around a casino floor and Luke Skywalker's there.
No, I'm nodding. I think I'm not.
Well, now let's go into the Lionsgate presentation. Of course, that was a lengthier part of the morning's program. Adam Fogelson, the chair of the Motion Picture Group, very active in presenting some titles. Let's go over these in a chronological order here in terms of release date rather than the order that they were presented in the event, because the presentation ended, I think, on a high note with a promotion of Hurry Up Tomorrow, the film starring The Weeknd and Jenna Ortega, coming out on May 16th. The Weeknd coming up on stage singing 2 songs. Great ending. I think I will say this without hyperbole, one of the more memorable moments for me at CinemaCon. Yeah. Everyone was excited. Everyone was in a good mood. I think it really rounded off a Lionsgate presentation that had something to prove. I'm not sure if it proved everything it needed to, but I do think a lot of people walked away from Lionsgate with a positive impression. And then the presentation did open with an extended action sequence from Ballerina. Ana de Armas, the star present here at the event, showed up in person to talk a little bit about the role. Chad, what did you think of the footage we saw from Ballerina? Because that is, at this point, until we hear a little bit more about what is or isn't happening with Michael, supposedly still on the schedule for October. Yeah, no, we'll talk about that in a little bit.
I know it's human nature, but
it stands out here because of its omission from the presentation. But since Michael is up in the air, Ballerina has to be what works for Lionsgate. Did Lionsgate prove something to exhibition with what we saw today?
This franchise always has the most incredible stunt sequences, and I felt like what they showed us today definitely got me excited to see the film. And I'm looking forward to maybe a little more plot with this one, a little more background.
Do we need
characters.
I don't want
I
that.
don't need it. I like it. You'd like it.
If she has to protect the
I'm
kid,
not
I'm
sure.
be really pissed because I'm tired of.
Yeah, like the mother symptom every time you have a female action hero.
But that's the exception to the rule.
I mean, listen,
Gloria was a long time ago.
it worked with Aliens.
That was also a long time ago.
But it sold out Alien,
Yes.
in
Let's
doing
change
that,
that.
and that it also was the worst part of Aliens, in adding that maternal instinct. It didn't work for me. Now, Ballerina isn't the only John Wick title that was talked about at this Lionsgate presentation, and this is where I start asking questions on where this is all going, because, all right, one spinoff is fine, and I know they reshot, a
John
couple
Wick
of years
3.5.
back, and now John Wick, played by Keanu Reeves, is going to be prominently featured in Ballerina. I get it. Spin-off, let's see how that works. But now we learned that there's going to be an animated John Wick prequel. Okay.
Will it be G-rated and kid-friendly? I hope so.
I mean, okay. Who knows?
No, it will not be.
No, of course not. But do we need it?
No.
Let's see. And then do we need a John Wick 4 spin-off from Donnie Yen?
Sure, because Donnie Yen getting Hollywood money to do whatever the hell he wants, that has my interest regardless
Is the only way we can do that by attaching it to the John Wick thing?
You know what?
Can we just not give him money because he's fantastic at what he does?
Well, because that's the problem with IP is that people won't show up unless it's something they already know or connected to something they already know.
And that's
it's terrible.
That's where I
the
start
audience.
rolling my eyes. That's where I start rolling my eyes.
I agree.
Listen, Lionsgate movie that you give Donnie Yen the power and influence to do what he wants in a Hong Kong style action flick that gets a wide release in the United States. Sign me up.
Yeah.
Do we need to dress it up in a John Wick costume to get it done, get it over the finish line? I'm not sure. And then, of course, I think the best part of this, the only part that makes sense out of this, in my opinion, I know they killed him off in John Wick 4. Spoiler
John
alert.
dies at the end.
Oh, but who cares? It's the movies. John Wick 5 with Keanu Reeves coming back
He's
and Chad
dead.
Stahelski coming back to direct.
This isn't
Confirmed
Saw.
to come back.
I don't want
from
Hoffman in the
Lionsgate.
John Wick version.
I don't. It's fine. It's movies. I mean, listen. I like the first 4 John Wicks.
Oh, yeah.
It's easier for me to buy into a John Wick 5 than buy into 2 live-action spin-offs and an animated prequel. Chad, do you think there's a threat here of John Wick getting beaten to death on the IP canon here?
That's where the danger can come in with some oversaturation or something that doesn't work.
Yeah.
And then the franchise has some
issues.
Yeah.
This is an industry problem. This is an audience problem. If audiences still showed up for new stuff, studios wouldn't have to keep IP that is way past its prime and or decades out of date alive, artificially alive.
All right, let's go to the original stuff.
Here's the terrible Lionsgate. I didn't even think about this, but when you looked at 2025 for Lionsgate heading into the year, Saw 11, Ballerina, Michael. There's a good chance 2 or 3 of those won't exist.
Yeah.
So,
and there was a chance maybe, a year ago that you'd say, it's probably going to be Ballerina and Saw 11, right? So we'll get into that in a little bit. But, okay, you don't want to talk too much about on the IP side. That's fine. We'll talk about the Now You See Me IP in a little bit. But there are originals in the Lionsgate slate. And 2 compelling originals based on books and novels. And that's the way movies used to work. we got a glimpse of this blast in the past industry. The Long Walk, adapted from a Stephen King story that looks like a more interesting version of The Hunger Games, if you ask me. I thought this footage, this trailer that we saw, featuring Mark Hamill on a surprising heel turn, was great. I was really captivated by it. The movie gets stated at the presentation, a September 12th release. Great spot on the calendar for something a little bit dark. Chad, how did you react to that trailer?
I loved it. I haven't read the source material, so I really didn't know what I was walking into, and everything about it, I was in. It looks a little Hunger Games-esque, you could say, in terms of the storyline, and Lionsgate obviously does really well with that kind of content.
And continuing here with the originals, on Christmas Day, we've got another adaptation of a popular book, The Housemaid. There's 3 books in this. Obviously, this is going to be an attempt to launch something. Director Paul Feige, and stars Sydney Sweeney and Amanda Seyfried attending the event in person. We saw some footage. I think it's an interesting thriller here. I like where this is going. I was pleasantly surprised. Chad, do you think this has some potential in a packed Christmas window?
Well, yeah, that is problematic when it's got to stand out against a lot of big releases. But I will say...
Avatar.
Yeah.
I mean, not only a lot of big releases, a huge release.
A huge release.
Avatar.
Yeah. But I will say I heard a lot of exhibitors and people here talking about the footage from this film. I heard someone talking about having read the books, that she was very excited to see this come to life. So I haven't read them myself, but I'm intrigued for sure.
This is, obviously we're halfway through. This is the best trailer I've seen so far this week.
Housemaid. That's a big endorsement.
I went into it because I love Paul Feig when he's on his A game. Obviously, I am a lifelong Amanda Seyfried fan. Sydney Sweeney is fine. I was so thrilled when she basically responded to Madame Web bombing by saying, I don't care, my words, I don't care. It got me a good relationship with Sony and allowed me to make my rom-com that people actually shut up for. Like, oh my God, the kids are going to save us. They get it. It can just be a job.
Exactly. It doesn't have to be anything else in a job. And if you're good at it, everybody wins.
But no, I mean, this looks, the trailer... Again, I don't know the budget, and it might, it does seem to mostly take place in one very large house. That being said, it felt bigger than any of these films that we've seen since Gone Girl.
Yeah.
Now, again, this is not 2014. Movies like Gone Girl making through $366 million, that does not happen anymore. But Girl on the Train, I could see it.
Yeah.
And it was, I like the people involved. Everybody looks like they're having fun. The trailer is engrossing and interesting without really giving away who's playing who. Mm-hmm. And it promises lots of psychological showdowns between Seyfried and Sweetie. And it's just, as someone that, again, would much rather watch... And they have chemistry,
by the way. I don't know how you felt. Even on stage at the presentation, Chad, you could feel that there was like an energy that they were playing off of each other.
Yeah, they called out Sydney Sweeney being a big fan of Amanda Seyfried before. Yeah. So that was a fun moment.
I'm a huge fan.
Yeah.
And I'll be
very
honest,
underrated
actress, there was a period, a little bit after Letters from Juliet, maybe In Time, where it looked like, she could become one of the many, many, many supernaturally attractive in bombshells that just doesn't become a big deal and just sort of fades into oblivion. And I think, weirdly enough, streaming helped her.
Yeah, with that the Dropout, I think.
The Dropout was good for her. She did some good
for her. I think it's good choice of roles.
Yeah.
For Amanda Seyfried, I think she's been very smart in not taking the easy money.
Yes.
That is usually offered to these actresses in some very simple roles. She's taken some roles that I think she's even addressed in some interviews.
Yeah.
That, listen, she didn't nail Les Mis. She wasn't there to sing live, and she accepts that. I think she nailed the Mamma Mia movies. I think she was great in that. And you're right. I think the streaming pivot worked for her career, a very compelling career, and I think The Housemaid is potentially the next great chapter in what she's
again,
given
without
us.
overselling its potential, ideally it will be kind of seen as sort of a generational coronation of an undervalued talent.
Yeah. Yeah.
with the people that grew up on her earlier movies now representing some of the adults in the room.
No,
And that's something that you see a lot of. That Keanu Reeves in the late 2010s.
Yeah.
Where it's like all of a sudden, oh no, wait, he actually is a good actor.
And we enjoy watching them on screen.
Yeah.
And Lionsgate is good at integrating this type of talent in genre movies.
Yes.
That's what I think makes the studio stand out. That's their role in the industry. Now, unfortunately, we do have to go back to the IP part of the conversation because there are 2 more IP properties here in the Lionsgate slate. On November 14th, we got an update on the official title of Now You See Me 3. It is now titled Now You See Me, Now You Don't.
Which should have been the title of the second film in 2016.
That's a good one, yeah. Ruben Fleischer attached to direct. The movie has a bigger scope, larger global stakes, according to Adam Fogelson. I got nothing to add here. It's not a movie for me. I mean...
This is a classic example of... Now You See Me was a smash hit in 2013, back when a great cast and a terrific high concept was enough.
Yeah.
I didn't even think the movie was all that good. I like the second one better, frankly. For a couple of reasons, one of which is that the magic actually looks plausible in the second film. Some of the stuff in the first film was like, that's sorcery, that's not magic.
It's a type of movie that I would have loved at age 14.
Yes.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
And I don't have to love it at age 39.
Even though I am...
At 14, I'm good. And we still need movies for that demographic.
Yeah, exactly. And even though I am depressed at the idea that this film that was used to be just, a surprisingly successful original just because, is now trying to be retrofitted into its IP now.
I feel this is the type of movie that would have come out in 1994 and never gotten a sequel.
Yes.
And we would have all been okay with that.
Exactly. Except then 30 years later, Sony would put out a legacy sequel saying, it's a franchise now. I mean, come on. Nothing against him, but Freddie Prinze Jr. showing up in that trailer felt like a Mad TV parody of Force Awakens style legacy sequels.
Don't you besmirch my Freddie Prinze Jr.
It's not
we are very pro Freddie Prinze Jr. in this
He's
box
a
office
lovely
podcast.
human being. He's an
You can go on your
underrated
box
actor.
office podcast and say all negative things you want on Mr. Prinze
So you
Jr.
didn't feel bad for him.
Dude, I'm just happy Freddie Prinze Jr.'s back. I'm just happy we get it. It's like the McRib. Is it good? I don't know, but it's back. And you know what? I'm going to go to the drive-thru and not tell my wife I stopped by McDonald's on my way home. It's fine. Let's keep on going here on the IP side because we've got another Hunger Games movie coming out on November 20th, 2026. Lionsgate successfully engineered a relaunch of this IP.
The last film was much better than I expected. It was shot, it was just good. It was really good. It was well made. It was well constructed. It looked gorgeous. I saw it twice in theaters. And it opened soft, partially because it was like almost 3 hours, which is a different conversation. But it was up until, a year later, 2 years later, a year later, it was the leggiest YA pre-Thanksgiving opener ever. Leggier than any of the Harry Potters, any of the Hunger Games, any of the even
it connected with an audience that we didn't know was still there, and that was crucial.
It connected with an audience that was young enough because the film, without being obnoxious about it, there were certain anime influences, there were certain book talk problematic phase from enemies to lovers type shenanigans that was very appealing to people that didn't grow up with the Hunger Games.
Yeah. Let's move on here with some of the other titles here that were mentioned but are still undated from Lionsgate. 2 of them stand out here. We did see more footage than I expected from Power Ballad, directed by John Carney.
They didn't show the entire movie?
It felt like a nice surprise, from a presentation where there was more IP than maybe I'm comfortable with.
Yeah.
It was nice to see an original like this, even though we don't have a release date yet.
No, this is a really
Chad,
long trailer.
This looks like something up your alley.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. I love John Carney. I love his work. And I think this is a really interesting concept. I feel like it's things we've seen headlines on maybe before in the past where a song comes out and someone feels like it's their content that's been stolen. Yeah, it looks good.
It's kind of like a Star is Born bromance is my elevator.
That's actually a good pitch.
Yeah.
Right? That kind of sounds.
And it's
like
always nice to see Paul Rudd playing a regular guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel that, in the last 10 years of just all franchises all the time, I say that whenever I see any actor that isn't playing a marquee character in a fantasy property of some kind.
We do have to talk about a couple of omissions here on the schedule. Well, really one omission on the schedule. Getting a passing mention, but nothing else, is the one film that was the centerpiece of the Lionsgate presentation last year. We learned nothing about the Michael Jackson biopic And that spells trouble here because, guys, we had this before the year started. It's one of the breakout hits of the year.
Mhm.
Then that news report from your colleagues at Puck News comes out. And what were they thinking? I mean,
that was my thought. It's like,
I mean,
do
you can make
are
a
you
movie.
making a movie that's like no fun? Putting aside problematic this, problematic that.
Right.
It's like, why would you make a movie tailored to Michael Jackson fans that is not
about the
going
sexual
to be,
abuse
which
allegation?
is not going to be fun to watch?
It's the worst possible decision. If the reporting pans out, of course, I have every reason to track the reports that are out there. But it's surprising that the film had to be reshot and redated. Originally, it was supposed to come out this weekend.
Yes.
Let's not forget that. Michael,
Yeah.
in a
April-
bizarro
wait,
universe,
April- I
is
think
coming
April
out
18th?
Friday, I thought.
I think it was originally Easter weekend, April 18th.
All right, so
And
in
then-
a couple of weeks, this was supposed to be guys, enjoy your pre-sales in the
exactly.
bank. We're just going to high-five each other.
When you guessed it, and I was like, oh, this schedule looks pretty crappy. I don't know about Survive Till 25. That was the obvious title that you correctly threw out. It's like, you and Jeremy is like, oh, no, Michael's like, oh, yeah, you're right. Michael,
Yeah,
you're right.
that's going to be
We're fine.
the big April hit. And even when they push it to October, I was like, all right.
Yeah, whatever.
Why not
One good
October,
release.
there's a gap. At
Yeah.
this point, we have to ask, is the movie coming out? Because Lionsgate did not do a good job in selling the idea that this film doesn't have a massive headache on its hands. So a loud omission here on the Michael side, but if we look, we're discussing this chronologically in
Yes.
terms of release dates, it really wasn't a factor in the presentation itself in the auditorium at CinemaCon because Lionsgate very smartly finished the show with a 2-song performance from The Weeknd, and I was singing along, man. I didn't care. I wasn't worried.
You know what?
I got to see some John Wick action sequences from Ballerina, and it finished with a mini concert from an artist
I
like that.
agree with you. But just me personally, I didn't realize that they hadn't done Michael until the weekend concert
I
started.
think that was
playing.
on purpose. I think that's the point.
No,
Like,
it
hey.
reminded me. I mean, the concert reminded me that they had forgotten about Michael. So
Yeah.
like, oh, wait a minute, where the hell's Michael?
Well, nowhere to be seen, and hopefully he's going to be there on October 3rd, October 1st.
Which is a great
on
release
on
date unto
screens.
itself. That's why I did not particularly wasn't concerned when they moved the date.
We'll see what happens with that title. That wraps it up with the Lionsgate conversation. Now let's move over to Warner Brothers, which also had a number of titles on the schedule here. And once again, we're going to be going over the movies on a chronological order basis. We have to start with an alarm because we said this in our preview episode that Sinners didn't have enough publicity stills on the media site for people that write about these movies to feel comfortable that there's a real marketing campaign behind it. We said before the presentation went on that we really needed to see a big push on this Ryan Coogler film that is scheduled to come out on April 18. We didn't get any footage, guys. We got a video address from Coogler, and we got a free t-shirt at the end of the night. Chad, is that enough?
To be fair, I have spoken to 2 completely disparate critics that have seen the film. They both say, A, it's very good, and B, without going into details, there's a lot of stuff that's not in the marketing.
I know, and we've discussed this in the podcast. There's some spoilers there that is going to turn this into a word of mouth film, but people have to know that the film exists.
Exactly.
Scott.
Right.
No,
And I'm getting worried that
and to me, that's the
because guess what? A free T-shirt at CinemaCon ain't gonna cut it.
and that to me is the must succeed release on Warner Brothers slate. I mean, I believe they could make Superman into a hit, wherever the hell that means in
I don't
2025.
think it's that crucial. I think they're gonna have a really good weekend with Minecraft this weekend. I think a lot of that pressure
But
on Warner Brothers is gonna be
the
lifted
idea of
by
them
Monday.
doing non-franchise, auteur-driven, aspirational pictures, if they can't sell Sinners, which I would argue is the most commercial of the bunch, then what the hell? The old Warner Brothers, the one that turned American Sniper into a blockbuster, turned A Star Is Born into a blockbuster, Gravity, It, Wonder Woman to a certain extent, that Warner Brothers is the best in the business at marketing and selling less conventional big movies into relative blockbuster tentpoles.
Well, that treatment is not being applied to Sinners. Chad, how concerned are you? Because we said this in the preview episode. We needed to see something. We saw nothing, but we're walking out with a T-shirt.
I guess I'm just kind of scratching my head. Like, is there is there so much content that would be spoilers that they're trying to keep it? But like you said,
I'll say something a little bit more facetious. Is the marketing budget the T-shirt? Because that's what it seems like. Because there's not enough, even just publicity stills on the media site. The most marketing I've seen for a movie from Ryan Coogler, who has always delivered with every single one of his films, is a free T-shirt I got tonight. On the flip side of that, we have a little bit more to talk about on the P.T. Anderson side of the conversation. One of the most anticipated titles, I think, for people on this podcast at the Warner Brothers presentation was One Battle After Another, the upcoming P.T. Anderson film with Leo DiCaprio. The movie is opening on September 26th. P.T. Anderson did not show up to CinemaCon, which sounds like an obvious statement, but let's remember we had Kogonada here yesterday. And we had Darren Aronofsky here yesterday, so I guess it wouldn't have been that weird if P.T. Anderson did show up. We did get Leo DiCaprio though, which not a bad second place prize, and we did get a lot of footage with Inherent Vice vibes. Talking about Warner Brothers releases that are coming up on the schedule here, we've got The Bride with an exclamation mark at the end. Should we shout
Deservedly.
it? The Bride.
The Bride.
Okay,
it's the movie you hoped Joker Folie à Deux was going to be.
Well, we hope that's the case. The film is scheduled for March 2026. We saw a good amount of footage from this. I mean, I'm not talking 15 minutes.
No, it was an extended
for a movie
trailer.
coming out like a year from now.
Mm-hmm.
It certainly
nice.
didn't look like a troubled production.
No. I'm not going to go into those rumors. What I'm going to say is that this isn't a guarantee in the marketplace by any means, but there is enough here that the right marketing campaign can make this something really compelling come March. I also said that about Mickey 17 a year ago. So it can play out in many ways. I am a big fan of Maggie Gyllenhaal's last film, The Lost Daughter, and I will basically use that goodwill to buy a ticket. Maybe an IMAX for The Bride.
Again, not to beat a dead horse, but the marketing of Warner Brothers in the 2010s, this is the kind of movie they could have turned into an unexpectedly successful picture. Now, Crimson Peak comes to mind.
Chad, how did you feel about what we saw?
Yeah, I feel like Maggie Gyllenhaal talked very passionately about the project, and it's something that I was already interested in our preview episode. I wanted to see something from this, so I was really glad that we got to see some footage. They really talked up the IMAX aspect of it.
A lot of aspect ratio talk.
Yeah.
We usually don't spend that much on aspect ratio. I mean, whatever. I'm into it, so sure.
But I will say there are a lot of monster kids out there. So this is something I think
they might throw their hat into the ring for this. Moving on to another highlight of the presentation, and I think this was the best part of the Warner Brothers presentation. And after that 2-song performance from the weekend, probably the second best part of the day is we got to see the first 10 minutes of F1.
It looks good. It looks, the gimmick, I think, is what we shot this during actual race car races or whatever. And you can kind of tell in a way.
It's Top Gun Maverick and a Formula One car. And that's all I need.
Yeah.
And it looked awesome. It was a good 10 minutes. It looks
good. And Joseph Kosinski, is that his? Yeah.
We'll go with
He's
that.
very good at this kind of thing. I'm one of the 8 people that wasn't crazy about Top Gun, but I will ride or die for Only the Brave.
Now, to close out this presentation, we have to remind our audience that since before we got here, I think everyone was on the same page. We're going to get to Vegas. We're going to show up to Caesar's Palace, and Superman is going to be everywhere. So the same impact that Barbie had in, what was it, the 2023 edition of this event, where as soon as you walked into this building, you knew that the summer of Barbie was a real thing. I was really expecting for Superman to be everywhere at CinemaCon 2025. We haven't really seen it in the hallways. We did have a long portion of the Warner Brothers presentation dedicated to Superman coming out this summer. However, it was very little footage and a very lengthy chat between the principals and the filmmaker that
was as vanilla and generic and lacking in substance as you could possibly imagine one of these presentations. And again, I don't expect hard-hitting journalism in these presentations.
No, but it sucked the air out of the room. I mean, Chad, we weren't sitting together. Were the
bored.
people around you at all engaged when they were talking about Superman?
Unfortunately, not. People were getting up. They were going to the bathroom. They were typing on their
big
computers.
problem.
Yeah.
That's a big problem. I'm gonna out you, Scott. You were playing games on your phone.
I finally gave up. I was not up until that point.
You're doing. I mean,
Yeah.
we were all working. I was
Yeah.
looking around. Nobody was listening
And
to
because-
whatever they were saying about Superman. It droned on forever. That's not what you want
And-
out of a movie that could potentially be the biggest film of the summer, if not the year. Huge red flag that when you have this platform to speak to the global exhibition community, at least on press row, no one's paying attention. And I hate to be so negative on this, and it doesn't dictate anything.
No.
Because consumers aren't at this event. Consumers aren't part of this conversation. So maybe there is a great marketing campaign that gets launched in the coming weeks that is consumer facing, that gets to drive the awareness and the buzz and excitement. But there was no buzz and excitement for Superman at CinemaCon. And that is a missed opportunity. There was a lot of buzz and excitement for F1. I don't want to say that
Yeah,
nothing
and The
worked for
Bride.
Warner Brothers. And The Bride.
The Bride's the one
But
that
this
knocked my
really
socks off.
should have been the centerpiece of the presentation. And it was just kind of like a ho-hum ending that we were all looking at our watches like, hey, it's close to dinner time. When are they going to wrap this up?
It's a metaphor for my concern about this film, which is that theoretically they expected, okay, we have Superman. That's enough. People will be excited because, hey, look, Superman's here. And
to be fair, that may not be the case for this film.
oh yeah, I mean,
But convince us.
yes.
You have 20 minutes with the press and the global exhibition community in a room staring at a massive screen. Convince us. There were concerns, and I think those concerns are slightly raised.
Yes.
Again, I don't think this dooms a project. We're not saying this film isn't going to work. We're just saying it was a missed opportunity
Yes.
at this presentation.
And it was such an unforced error that we cannot help but wonder what if it means anything.
Yeah.
Because it would be journalistic malpractice not to. Because it's such an obvious, unforced, it was a layup.
It was a layup, as opposed to, and we opened this segment talking about Sinners, where there's a bigger lift you have to do on something like this, right? And there's a word of mouth aspect to it. And it's really underwhelming that you walk out of this presentation on a film that could get a lot of buzz, and you walk out of it with zero footage and a free t-shirt. It was even a bigger letdown to finish the presentation with that was Superman?
Yeah.
Okay. So unfortunately, that wrapped up, let's say, uneven Warner Brothers presentation. I think some missed opportunities there. Some highlights. We mentioned weapons. We mentioned F1. F1 really is the big crowning highlight
But do
from
you
the
think
evening.
regular audiences will care any more than they did about Driven in early 2001?
I think it's a very different property. Extremely different property. Lewis Hamilton, a global superstar, being involved with a film like this. This is a global play. Driven was never a global play.
Yeah.
This is Top Gun Maverick in a race car.
Fair.
With an established major sports league on the logo. It's like making NBA the movie with Brad Pitt in it, and also LeBron James is producing.
And as we know, that's the only way to make money on Looney Tunes movies.
Well, at least I think F1 is the one thing that I walk out of this Warner Brothers presentation thinking they've got this.
Yeah.
Right? And there are other things that we're going to have to wait in the coming weeks and months to find out just how much traction they have. And of course, you can find all that coverage at boxofficepro.com. A huge thank you to our colleague Scott Mendelson for joining us today. And a big thank you for Chad Kenrick to helping out in this conversation on the big highlights of day 2 at CinemaCon. Coming up next is a sponsor interview with our friends at ICE Theaters. And following that is my interview with Jane Hastings, the CEO of Event Cinemas Australia and the chairwoman of the Global Cinema Federation.
ICE Theaters, the ultimate immersive cinema experience, where innovation meets immersion, extending beyond the screen and surrounding you with light, color, and action, deepening every emotion. This is cinema like never before. Discover the future of moviegoing and premium cinema only at ICE Theaters.
And we are back here in the sponsor segment of today's episode of the Box Office Podcast at CinemaCon 2025 with a long-standing partner of our podcast, a longtime supporter, a great premium format concept known as ICE Theaters coming over from France. We've got a trio of executives here. Gentlemen, can you introduce yourselves? Let's start with Aram.
I am Aram Lasis. I'm actually with Strong Technical Services. We partner with ICE Theaters.
I'm Alex. I'm a chief content officer of ICE Theaters. And this year we're very exciting to CinemaCon again.
Hi, Daniel. I'm Thomas, and I'm the VP creation and post-production on all the different kind of content that we are promoting in the ICE Theaters.
Well, wonderful to have you guys here. Trio of experts when it comes not only to this technology, but also implementing it, because we know there's a number of adoptions worldwide, Latin America. You've got markets like India really coming up, and of course, your home market like in France. Alex, can we start with you in talking about what ICE Theaters is and introducing the concept to some of our audience that maybe might not be that familiar with this premium format innovation?
Yes, of course. So ICE Theater stands for immersive cinema experience. It's a premium format designed to pull you deeper into the movie. We had LED side panels that extend the action beyond the screen, plus, of course, a 4K laser projector or Dolby Atmos sound, and a full reclining seat or back reclining seats, the design of the auditoriums. But the idea is simply to wrap the moviegoers in the movies. We are fully focused, fully immersed. Unlike other formats owned by theater chains, ICE is independent. It's one PLF made by exhibitor for all exhibitors, and we are 100% focused on Olympic cinema standout.
Yeah, it's a great technology. When you sit down in that auditorium and you see how those LED panels just light up and direct the viewer's attention to the screen, it's really something. And Alex, as we know, this is a technology that's grown in the last number of years. What's the current footprint of the technology?
I would say first, this year we have opened some new auditoriums in France, in India, and also we opened the Ecuador. So ICE is the last PLF and the very new PLF, but we are the number one in terms of screen in France. So our experience is clearly strong in France. 2024 was a record-breaking year for ICE. So we have a new record on the lineup with 50 movies released in the ICE format, which is very, very a lot. Now we work with three biggest film industry in the world: USA, Indian, and French film industry. We are really proud of that because this is every day a crazy challenge to work with this industry.
Yeah, and it's great to hear. As you mentioned, you have all of the content coming in from those US Hollywood studios. You have local content coming in from India. And of course, the footprint you have with your partner PVR there in that market is great. And being a French company, being part of CGR, one of the biggest circuits in France, also gives you access to those titles. 50 movies coming out in the ICE format this year. It's great to hear. Let's talk about expectations, Alex, because there's a lot being said right now on what the right premium format is for each exhibitor. From your end, what are you really focused on in growing when it comes to ICE Theaters in 2025?
So our main goal is clearly to grow the ICE community. We are now team up with technical partners all over the world. People really understand exhibitors and people, they are very close with the needs. So ICE become the first premium format that we can be distributed and marketed by technical partners. So here the message for any exhibitor listening is, if you want to boost your area and bring a premium immersive format to your theaters, talk to your local partners. They knows what the best for you.
Yeah, I think that's very important. And that's one of the reasons why we have Aram here representing Strong. You guys work with a number of different technologies, a number of different brands. Make sure that they fit and they work as best as they can with local cinemas. From your perspective, Aram, how does ICE help exhibitors adapt to this evolving industry and very highly competitive premium format marketplace?
Yeah, I think, like you just said, I mean, we're definitely living in a time where the PLF landscape is kind of growing exponentially. A lot of the traditional names have expanded all over the place, and virtually every chain has their own named PLF model. And it makes it a little bit harder for the audience to really discern the difference between all of these different options. Whereas ICE, in addition to having, a cool name, I would say, it's immediately recognizable when you walk into the audience as something you haven't really seen before. For exhibitors, that means they're going to get a lot more, I think, of word of mouth coming from the audiences who have experienced it in person. That's going to help bring in other customers who want to see something they really can't see anywhere else.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of encapsulating what this offering brings moviegoers and exhibitors alike. We've already seen it be very successful in the markets where it's present. We mentioned Latin America, we mentioned India, we've mentioned markets like Spain and France. And of course, it's all down to the lineup, because without having a great lineup, your premium format is just existing in the wind. And that's a big thing that ICE Theaters has done over the last couple of years, Tomas. Can you tell us a little bit more about what this year means to ICE Theaters content-wise?
Yes, as Alex said before, 2024 was a major year for the ICE immersive format, as we have adapted 50 movies, including 11 Bollywood movies, which makes it an amazing success, with the biggest ones being Dune Part 2, Deadpool and Wolverine, Moana 2, Gladiator 2, etc. I would say that 2024 is the result of constant improvement in post-production. We are a team of 5 people working hard to make the best experience possible for the audience by adapting the movies into the side panels and backlights. The process of making a movie for the ICE immersive format is meticulous work. To improve that process, we have opened a second secure screening room, and we are constantly also focusing on R&D to make it the best possible.
Yeah, I think that's a very important perspective in making sure that the content is reflected on the screen in a premium format. It's super important that the viewers can see what that premium concept means once they sit in that chair. And that's what I really like about the ICE concept. Now, it seems like content is a crucial part for ICE Theaters. Can we talk a little bit about the upcoming releases and what this slate means to ICE Theaters moving forward?
Yes, of course, this is what the audience will be able to experience, and this is why they come to see the movie in ICE theaters. Overall, we have adapted more than 240 titles in ICE immersive format, including around 20 Bollywood titles, which we aim to continue the partnership we currently have with PVR and the local producers. And we are so excited about the next releases that are coming, like Thunderbolts, F1, How to Train Your Dragon, etc. for the first semester. And of course, Avatar, Fire and Ash at the end of the year, which will obviously be so great in ICE theaters. Avatar 2 was our biggest success at ICE theaters, so we're really excited to see how this one will do.
Listen, I'm excited to see Avatar, but I have to be honest, I really want to see how F1 looks like in an ICE auditorium. I'm
Yeah.
really excited to see that on the big screen with you guys. Well, thank you very much for your time representing ICE Theaters. We had joining us today Alex Puyat and Thomas Defrohu. And from Strong International, we've got Aram Lassis. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we are back here on the Box Office Podcast special CinemaCon edition. In today's episode, we are interviewing Jane Hastings, the CEO of EVT, one of the biggest circuits in Australia. And she's also the head of the Global Cinema Federation. Jane, welcome back to the podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Daniel. Nice to be here.
So we've got a lot to talk about here because the Global Cinema Federation recently released its latest study into movie-going trends, some of the priorities, some of the impediments from moviegoers on a global perspective. Before we get to that, let's start on a ground level basis here. Could you tell us a little bit about the GCF, the Global Cinema Federation, some of its background and what its role in the industry is?
Great. Well, the GCF has an executive committee which includes the CEOs of the top 12 exhibition companies and 2 leading industry bodies. And we're also supported by a strong advisory board, which has 75 exhibition companies and about 29 associations. So collectively, when you think about it, the GCF is representing about 70% of global box office. So why did it come together? Really good question. Because it's really important that exhibition has a global voice. You know, we're closest to the customer, we're a very important partnership in the industry, and so the GCF has come together to really represent that exhibition voice when we need it most, e.g. through COVID times. It was all about ensuring global COVID standard practices were in place, helping to get cinemas back open, to times like today, where we simply just want to share the global voice of the customer to really inform the industry.
And that's a crucial component of this recovery because we're still very much in a recovery mode from the pandemic. Taking a look at this on a global perspective, because the pandemic itself was a global crisis, especially for our industry, I think this research report reveals a lot of great insights as to how the cinema industry can continue growing into the future. From your end, looking at the most recent report, what were some of the most surprising insights from this study?
Well, Daniel, I'm not sure they're so as surprising when you're an exhibitor because you're hearing from your customers every day.
Mhm.
Maybe a surprise is there's more consistency in what customers want and how they're feeling globally than you may anticipate. So that's probably the one surprise. But I think the most important thing here, and you've already highlighted it, is the opportunity. So they clearly state people want to come to the movies when there's a film that appeals to them and they're seeking more. So as an industry, it's a really exciting time. I mean, what investor doesn't want to invest in an industry where demand outweighs supply? That's kind of the golden formula. So we feel that this research really, really demonstrates that customers are asking for more and there's an opportunity to fulfill that.
And this is truly a global study that you guys did. Over 68,000 moviegoers across 15 countries were polled. And the one insight here that I really want to highlight, 72% of those respondents agreed that a cinema visit is good value for money. That's something I think, Jane, we really have to shout out as loudly as possible because to this day, a trip to the movies continues to be an accessible, top end entertainment experience around the world, no matter how big or small the city or town is.
And as in Daniel, we kind of further explored that, right? I mean, because where can you go and spend that little amount of money and have 3 or 4 hours entertainment? Doesn't matter what demographic you are, that has high appeal. And that's further reinforced because we asked customers, how they were treating their discretionary spend. And you can see that cinema has really held whilst other out-of-home entertainment experiences have gone backwards. Why? Because when times are tough, it's the best value for money and offers great escapism. And also when times are good, it's still great value for money. And customers are overwhelmingly saying that.
It's great to hear. And I think, as we said, it's really something important to highlight at every level of this industry. Now, we also have to focus on the negatives here and learn from them in your study. One of the things that really stood out for me were the answers regarding the barriers to a cinema visit. 64% of respondents said they don't see any barriers to visiting the cinema when there's a movie they want to see. Now, from these responses, what do you make out of those barriers that are in the way between moviegoers and going to their local theater?
Well, I think it makes it really simple. There is one primary lever, and that is films that people want to come to see. And that's the overwhelming response. Often the industry talks about how do we grow attendance and how do we grow frequency? The answer is really simple. Provide the volume and variety of films that people want to see and they will come. And this global study has reinforced that because as you can see, that is the majority of the response just right there. When there's a film they want to see, they will come. But you know what? It doesn't mean that we don't stop improving everything else. So you can see that the lesser barriers, my cinema is not appealing to me at only 7%, but that means we've still got to keep improving that customer experience to make sure that they want to come. But I think another point that we really want to illustrate is at 6%, I'm not aware of what is on at the movies. We still have a job as an industry to improve the awareness of what is on at the movies. More marketing is really important.
That's crucial, and it's something that I've heard everywhere, that slate awareness continues to be a huge issue, and it's something that exhibition needs to work alongside distribution to make happen. You can't just let everything be a turnkey solution. The distribution is going to come in with that marketing plan, right?
Right, 100%. And, we have direct access to moviegoers and customers. But one thing I'm confident of, and particularly around the GCF, is everybody is focused on that key challenge. Everybody wants to make sure that their customers know what is on. I think the key challenge has been we haven't had enough to show them.
Yeah, I think that's key. Absolutely. And it's part of the evolution in this recovery, right? I think if we had this conversation 3 years ago, Jane, we would have been talking about the return to the movies, getting people comfortable to coming back. At this
Yes.
point, and the box office proves it, people have come back. It's all about regaining that frequency, making sure that it's a habit that you do 3, 4, 5 times a year instead of your annual visit for a special event or a special occasion.
It is, but that frequency can only happen. I think if you highlight to the research, they want more genres, right? I think the great thing is that the majority want more action adventure. We've got a really strong feature film lineup of action adventure films, and they still want more. So that's a great genre. But, where we see great opportunity is comedy. Customers will want to come to the movies to see comedies. And if you look at the forward lineup, in terms of wide releases, there's like only 4 films, 4 comedies, 2 of which are releasing in August side by side. So people still want to laugh in January, February, March, June, May, and December. So there's so many more months. We don't have specific allocated laughing months. People want more comedies. The same goes for romance films. We only have there's definitely less than 6 on the calendar at the moment. And, every month people are looking for that reason to come to the movies. So frequency is a factor of providing customers what they want to see.
I hope it's not gallows humor, but here's a suggestion for the GCF. Next year, the same way that wildlife associations put out endangered species lists, there's an endangered genre list that maybe we should collaborate on. It's a nice push to our colleagues in production about the sort of films that we'd really like back in our theaters.
But you know what? It's just opportunity.
Right.
When you've got a global demand, that kind of makes that investment worthwhile, isn't it? Gives you confidence to invest in it.
Absolutely. Let's look at the future of moviegoing here. And one of the areas where I think the industry has done a great improvement on is making sure that the standard of the moviegoing experience continues improving year after year. We see that with recliners, with projection and sound technology, even things like e-commerce, making sure that your mobile app and website is there and can catch audiences and can make it seamless for that e-ticketing process to go through. From your perspective, how is the cinema industry innovating right now to remain viable for audiences into the future? And specifically, Jane, for younger audiences who are the lifeblood of this industry?
Well, the great thing is there is a world of innovation going on. You look across Europe and Asia and domestically and the Pacific, there are so many great examples of people looking at different seating types, different food and beverage service, different technology experiences from IMAX to the 40X. People are developing their local premium formats, large screen premium formats. Behind every door, there's an opportunity for a new experience because there's so many experiences you can now choose for customers. And I guess what we felt good about is, we tested NPS, Net Promoter Score, and overall at 37, so that's a great score. But our younger demographic rated it at 48. And not only that, our younger demographic, I think 83% unprompted said they were excited to see something coming to the movies. So what exhibitors are doing right now is attracting and appealing to younger audiences. And I think that's the key message here is that it's like there are thousands of different types of recliners. There's shrouds, there's lounges. There are some amazing standard seats. There's beanbags. There's children's cinemas. There's director's chairs. There's couches. There's lounges. There's day beds. I don't think I've ever seen the industry explode with more innovation than what it has now. I think the challenge has been actually kind of presenting that narrative. And, on the GCF website, we've got an innovation section there where we're encouraging people to to show off, because they should, because there's some really great investment and experiences happening. And even more importantly, you can see from global average ticket price, the fact that that's reaching record levels, customers are prepared to pay for that better experience. So I think there's a lot of confidence in doing that.
And it's not just about paying for that experience, but making sure that they see the value in it. And I think that's one of those aspects of this study that really impressed me, that I'm very happy to see, is that even with the ticket prices going up because the experience is going up, there's still a value that they are recognizing. The moviegoer knows that this is a place that's not just a place to watch movies, but it is the best place to watch a movie in.
That's exactly it. And it's the total experience we are selling. And that's exactly why we've tested value. Because I think that overall, when you leave the cinema, was that a great way to spend your time? And customers are saying yes.
Absolutely. And it's not just about doing things on a global level. Of course, I think when we talk about things on the GCF perspective, we're looking at a number of markets, at multinational circuits. As you know, Jane, everything starts locally with that individual location, making sure they're providing a service to their local community. Looking at this report, looking at some of these findings, what steps can local cinemas take to better engage with their moviegoers, to make sure that that frequency challenge that we currently have can be addressed and overcome?
I think there's an exciting opportunity for local operators to broaden programming, really understand their local demographic. You'll see the countries and the locations globally that have already recovered beyond pre-COVID. And what's the difference? It's broader programming and content. A lot stronger local content helps that. But even in Australia and New Zealand, we are very into the Bollywood program. We're really into Cinema Asia, and Nizar was a good example of supporting that through a quieter period. There is a lot of opportunity to broaden your programming because people want to come to the movies if there's something that appeals to them. So I think there's an exciting opportunity in a local sense. Local may be more global than you think.
And we can't lose sight of that, Jane. I think you said it perfectly. Even though there's so many innovations in terms of seating, in terms of menu options at the concession stand, nobody goes to the movies to order a cheeseburger. Nobody says, I really want to go to the movies just to get that bucket of popcorn.
Correct.
It always starts with the movie. Anything you can offer beyond that, perfect. But it's the movie that brings the people in. And that goes back to that challenge. We really have to have a more consistent slate to be able to get back to that level of frequency that we enjoyed in the back half of the 2010s.
That's exactly right. They don't come to sit in a seat and eat a good cheeseburger, even though the cheeseburgers are very good globally now, Daniel.
Yeah.
That is not the reason they're turning up. So making sure that it's a great experience when they're there, no doubt that's important, but the primary driver is something they want to see.
Well, Jane, thank you so much for joining us here on the Box Office Podcast. Hopefully I'll run into you during CinemaCon week in Las Vegas. It gets hectic, but I hope you bring your walking shoes.
Great, we will. I'll see you soon. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. And a huge thank you to our guest today. That wraps up today's episode of the Box Office Podcast at CinemaCon 2025. Don't forget to subscribe. We'll have a fresh episode for you tomorrow morning. Thanks again for joining.